Pajama pants are a great sewing project for all kinds of skill levels. With only a few pieces and no really complicated shapes, there's not much that can go wrong. So let me show you how I made these. These are my favorite pajama pants. I've already fixed them a few times, but now they're really beyond repair. So I'm going to copy them and make a new pair with the same fit. I'm using this nice cotton fabric and I'll just pop it in the wash quickly to get any shrinking out of the way before I start sewing. For my pattern I have to copy two pieces, the front of the leg and the back. To do this I place the pants on some pattern paper and I trace the pieces all the way around, following the seams. I then add 1.5 centimeters of seam allowance on all the sides. These pants don't have the side seam at the actual side, but a bit more to the front, so I take that into account when I'm tracing the back of the leg. I'm adding an extra 1.5 centimeters of seam allowance at the bottom of the legs, so that I can make a double seam. The one thing my old pants were missing was pockets. So I'm adding some simple pockets to the new pattern. Time to cut the fabric. I laid out the pattern pieces on the folded fabric and pinned them in place. This way I'll automatically get a left and a right version of each pattern piece when I cut through both layers of fabric. I cut the pieces out with pinking shears to prevent them from fraying. I prepared the pocket opening by cutting notches around the curve and folding the raw edge over twice. I then stitched it down. I did the same to the outer curve, again cutting notches and folding the edge over twice. I then placed the pockets on the front leg pieces and transferred the pins to include the new layer of fabric. I then stitched the pockets in place. Now I can assemble the legs. For the inner seam I'm using a flat fell seam, which you may recognize from the inner seams of your jeans. I made a separate video about this technique in case you're unfamiliar with it. But of course you can also use any other type of seam that you like. For the outer seam I'm using what's in Dutch called an English seam, and in English is called a French seam. I've also made a separate video about this technique in case you want to know more details, but again, feel free to use a different type of seam. Now that the two legs are done, I can stitch them together at the crotch. To do this, I'm placing one leg inside the other, and for the crotch seam, I'm again using a flat fell seam, which is nice and strong. To make the waistband, I'm measuring the circumference of the pants and the circumference of my waist. If you're using a non-stretchy fabric for the waistband, your piece should be the circumference of your pants plus 3 centimeters long and 10 centimeters wide. I'm using a stretchy fabric, so I'm cutting a piece that's the length of my waist plus 3 centimeters of seam allowance long and again 10 centimeters wide. I'm starting by adding 2 buttonholes to my waistband for the drawstring to come through. My machine has an automatic buttonhole function, so that's easy. If you can't make buttonholes by a machine or by hand, you can easily leave the drawstring out, since it's mostly decorative. I'm folding the waistband in half, right sides together, and I'm stitching the ends together with a 1.5 centimeter seam allowance. I then fold it over lengthwise and place it around the top of the pants, right sides together. I stitch it in place, again with 1.5 centimeters of seam allowance, but I'm leaving a gap on one of the sides to thread the elastic through. I cut a piece of elastic that's slightly shorter than my waist measurement and put a safety pin in one of the ends. Then I thread it through the waistband. Make sure the elastic isn't twisted anywhere and then sew the two ends together, turning it into one continuous loop. Now you can stitch the final gap of the waistband closed. To keep the elastic from twisting, sew a bit of it in place on both of the side seams. But don't stitch all the way up the waistband because the drawstring will need to go through the same tunnel. Put a safety pin in one end of the drawstring and thread it through the buttonhole all the way around the waistband, coming out the other buttonhole. Finally, I'll need to hem the legs. I marked the same length on both of the legs, and then I folded the edge over twice and pinned it in place. I sewed all the way around, and that finishes my pajama pants. My new pajama pants fit me just as well as the old ones, so I'm very happy. Thanks for watching, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, then leave me a like or a comment or something down below and subscribe for my future videos. I'll see you next time.